Breaking Away is the second episode of season 8, the final season of Full House. This is directed by Joel Zwick, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. I don't have that much to say. I have very few notes because not a lot happens. One part of the narrative feels a little underdeveloped. One part of it is very emotional, but it's quite slow. So I don't have any complaints, but there's not a lot going on. And I'll talk about Steph and Gia first of all, and then I'll talk about Nicky, Alex, Jesse, and Becky second. They're kind of the main narrative. Stephanie comes downstairs wearing a lot of makeup. She's wearing clothing that shows her midriff. And Danny begins to worry that Gia is a bad influence. And Stephanie says that she's her own person, just as Gia walks through the door wearing an almost identical outfit. It's very clear that Gia is an influence on Stephanie, might not be the best influence. And as always, Gia talks to Michelle in a way that's very patronising. And she says to her, "Are you ready for your first day of third grade?" To which Michelle responds, "Are you ready for your third year of seventh grade?" Which I absolutely love. There are a couple of exchanges like that in the episode, which I just thought were an absolute joy. And Gia is spending more time with Stephanie, and they're in Stephanie's bedroom and they're making an absolute mess. So Michelle tries to move in with DJ, and DJ obviously isn't having this, so she calls for Danny, and Danny goes through to the room, and he's not going to yell and shout. He's going to take a different approach, but it's very clear that as soon as he saw it, despite what he says, he did yell and shout. And the room is a mess. It is very, very, very messy. And he yells and shouts in front of Gia. I will say I don't agree with that. I don't agree with yelling at your child while their friend is there. Not only because it's humiliating for the child, but also it makes the friend, well, I was going to say it makes the friend really uncomfortable. I don't know if Gia would particularly care. But in general, I'm against that. But nevertheless, that's what's happened. And Gia leaves. Stephanie begins to tidy up, and she finds some food stuck to the clothing, and it was not pleasant. This is the part that I feel was underdeveloped. I was left wanting just something else, something a little bit extra, maybe a bit of realization from Stephanie. And I know what happens going forward in future episodes, so I don't want to talk too much about it. But in this episode, it just felt a little underdeveloped. Like we needed at least one more scene, or maybe that scene needed to be a little bit longer. So what we got was good, but it felt unfinished within this episode. We then come to Nicky and Alex, and they're getting ready for their first day of preschool. Becky is a wreck. She doesn't want them to leave, understandably. And I think this episode, I'm not a parent to children. I have a cat. I know it's not really the same, but I know that a lot of parents are very emotional when their children are going off to school. For a lot of parents, it's the first time that they're going to be spending a good chunk of the day away from their children, and Becky is understandably very emotional. So Jesse takes them off to preschool, and he realizes he doesn't want to leave them. So they're all ready to go off and run around and have fun. Jesse's not ready, and he takes them back home. And he and Joey decide that they're going to educate Nicky and Alex, and they try to do this, and it kind of backfires, and they fall asleep, and the boys are painting on them. And it was a cute scene. I really liked it. It's great to see Nicky and Alex growing up, and they're an absolute joy, and I think they're rather adorable. And Becky comes home, and she and Jesse have to realize, as they do, that Nicky and Alex need to go to school. Because if not now, when? Potentially the longer they leave it, the more difficult it's going to be. And there will always be, as I think Becky pointed out, there will always be times in life that are difficult. When they graduate, when they move out, when they potentially move away to a different state. I don't think she said that, but there will always be one more thing for them to get emotional about. So they just have to do it. And we have this beautiful scene at the end where they take the boys to preschool. And I think the most important thing with this episode, the biggest takeaway, is that the boys were happy. They said they liked preschool. And I think that was really significant, because if they didn't like it, it would have been a different message. It would have been a story of parents forcing their children to go to school because it's the right thing, which I'm sure happens often because most children don't want, well, many children don't want to go to preschool, at least to begin with. But the fact that they wanted to go highlighted that they weren't concerned. They weren't bothered about going. And Becky and Jesse just have to get on with it and do what's best for the boys. And it seems like the boys kind of know what's better for them than Becky and Jesse. So I think there are some really great messages in this. And it was really sweet at the end when they took the boys together, and it was just so heartwarming, and it's a lovely message that I think will be very beneficial for a lot of people in the same position as Becky and Jesse. So that part of the narrative worked really, really well. Absolutely no complaints. I do think the part with Gia and Stephanie, it just felt like something was missing. It felt like we needed just something else, just something a little bit. Yes, Stephanie did admit maybe the room was a little gross when she found the food on her clothing, but that for me wasn't enough. I feel like we needed just a little bit more. But again, what we got was good. I was just left feeling a little bit hanging. But that aside, it's still a decent episode. One step closer to the end of the season, which means the end of the show. But thankfully, we still have quite a way to go yet. And for now, I'm pleased to say that breaking away the second episode of season 8 is all round a pretty good episode of Full House.